please hit that subscribe button. Hey everybody, better suited to win the Stanley Cup this season. If you are new to the channel, Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins.
Locked on and he scored! And we're live. Hey everybody. So one thing that we all tend to do as fans is overreact. We overreact in a lot of different situations, both when things are going really well and when things are going really wrong. We tend to get rid of logic a little bit, don't look at things in a reasonable manner, and overreact in either direction depending on what's going on, and think either if something's going well, all of a sudden we're the greatest team of all time, or when things are not going well, all of a sudden the world is ending, everything's collapsing, and it's all falling apart. Generally, most of the time, neither of those things are the case in actually what's going on. And I think we've, over the past couple weeks, seen a good example of overreactions in both directions involving two very good hockey teams from the Metropolitan Division, the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Philadelphia Flyers. So before I explain, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please hit that like button if you haven't already, and give this video a thumbs up. That really helps out the channel. And if you are new, to please hit that subscribe button and follow along for all of my hockey content coming up here as we head towards the playoffs. So the Pittsburgh Penguins just ended a 6-game losing streak with a big win at home ice over the Ottawa Senators last night. But while Pittsburgh was on that losing streak, people were freaking out. There were people saying Pittsburgh all of a sudden wasn't going to make the playoffs. All of a sudden their whole season was falling apart. Everything was ending. And those were all complete overreactions to a losing streak. Every single team, unless you're last year's Tampa Bay Lightning and waiting until the playoffs to have your losing streak, every single team goes through stretches in a season where they're playing really well and other stretches where they are playing really bad and struggling. And Pittsburgh was struggling. There is no doubt about it. They were losing games to teams that they have no business losing games to. They were getting blown out in games. It was a rough patch for the Pittsburgh Penguins. There's no doubt about that. But it doesn't end their season. It doesn't mean they're not a playoff team anymore. It doesn't mean everything's falling apart and the season's over. I mean, look at that roster. Look at that team and how good they've been this year, how much they've already overcome this year, all the injuries they've overcome. They're still one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. Yes, they had a rough stretch. They had a bad losing streak. Look at the standings right now. They're still only 4 points back of the division lead. Even after that 6-game losing streak, they are only 4 points back of the division lead. They're only 1 point back of Philadelphia for second place. Can we stop acting like losing 6 games in a row, a tough 2-week stretch, all of a sudden just ended the Pittsburgh Penguins? They're still one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. They're still a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. And they went through a rough patch like most teams do throughout the season. It is a long NHL season, guys. 82 games is a lot of hockey. It's a lot of hockey. And there are going to be times where teams aren't playing their best, and we just saw that with Pittsburgh. Now they just beat Ottawa handily last night. I think Pittsburgh's going to be fine. They're still right there in the thick of the race in the Eastern Conference. They could still potentially win the division. They're going to be fine, and they're certainly going to be a playoff team. Anybody that said Pittsburgh all of a sudden wasn't going to make the playoffs, I think that's completely ridiculous. They're either saying that because they're strongly biased against the Pittsburgh Penguins and don't like the Pittsburgh Penguins, or they were saying that because they knew it was a ridiculous, outlandish thing to say and they wanted to get attention by saying it. But the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to the playoffs this year, guys. They're probably going to be a 2 or 3 seed. They're probably going to play Philadelphia in the first round, and that's going to be a very good, tough series for both of those teams. Pittsburgh's season is not over because of a losing streak. On the other hand, we have the Philadelphia Flyers, who are currently on a 6-game winning streak, red hot right now. Maybe for the Flyers, I should say orange hot, but that doesn't have the same ring to it. Either way, they're absolutely on fire right now, playing the best hockey they've played all season long. 6 wins in a row, going for 7 tonight against Washington. They're one of the best teams in the East as well. And before the season started, I thought Philadelphia was going to be a playoff team this year. They've been even better than I thought they were going to be this season. They're having a great year. But now all of a sudden they win 6 games in a row and everyone's talking Stanley Cup. Everyone is pumping Stanley Cup for the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, even there was just a poll out, or some numbers thing came out, some analytic trash that came out, says the Flyers have the best chance of winning the Stanley Cup. They're the favorite now. Hold up. This team, they're a good hockey team. There's no doubt about it. The Philadelphia Flyers are a good team this year. But let's hold up with making them Stanley Cup favorites because of one win streak. Hold on here, guys. Boston still exists with 96 points this season. Tampa Bay still exists. St. Louis still exists. Washington is still leading the division. Let's pump the brakes a little bit, guys, on the Stanley Cup favorite talk for the Philadelphia Flyers. One win streak. Yes, they've had a very, very good stretch here. They've been outstanding since the All-Star break. There are a lot of other good teams in the NHL. And Philadelphia probably going to face Pittsburgh in the first round. That is a tough matchup for them. That's a tough matchup for both of those teams. That series, to me, coin flip a coin, complete toss-up. That's going to be one hell of a playoff series if they do meet up. But let's not, just because of one good stretch here, all of a sudden start anointing the Philadelphia Flyers Stanley Cup champions before the playoffs even start. Because if there's anything that we know about the NHL, it's that when you get to the playoffs, everything goes back to zero. Everything resets and every team has a chance to beat anybody. And we saw it last year with all of the wild card teams winning. We know that anybody can beat anybody, and that's the beauty of the NHL. This is a difficult league, guys, and no matter how good you are in the regular season, it can all fall apart in the postseason. Look at Tampa Bay last year, and no matter how much you struggle in the regular season, or you could be a wild card team, a solid playoff team, but not one of those top tier teams, and you can get hot in the playoffs and go all the way to the conference final or all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Look at Carolina last year. Eastern Conference Final for a wild card team that just got into the playoffs. I mean, everything resets in the postseason, and you know there are a lot of tough matchups. Philadelphia is a contender. Don't get me wrong about that. They are a contender, but so are 10 to 12 other teams in the NHL. When you pull all 16 playoff teams together, I would say at least 10 to 12 of them have a legitimate shot of winning the Stanley Cup. And when we'll get a better look at that as we get towards the end of the season, and once we know who's in and who's out and where all these teams are at, I'll probably do a video on that and give you an idea of who has a legitimate shot at winning the Stanley Cup. But of the 16 teams that make the playoffs in the NHL, I would say any given year, 10 to 12 of them have a legitimate shot of winning the Stanley Cup. So no matter how good you are in the regular season, that is a lot of competition that you have to get through. And you've got to win 4 rounds to win the cup, and that's against quality opponents, and that is very difficult to do. So in both of these situations, guys, I think we've seen an overreaction on the negative side with the Pittsburgh Penguins to their 6-game losing streak, and I think people overreacted and thought that their season was falling apart and the world was ending. And quite frankly, that's not the case at all. They're still only 4 points back of the division lead. I mean, they legitimately lost 6 games in a row and are still only 4 points back of the division lead. They're at, 82 points right now? Washington's at 86. That's an overreaction. Their season's not over. They're still a playoff team. They're still one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. On the other side, we've seen an overreaction positively to the Philadelphia Flyers, where people have gone from calling them a playoff team and either finishing third or in a wild card spot to all of a sudden now the Flyers are Stanley Cup favorites. Ignoring Boston, ignoring Tampa Bay, ignoring Washington, ignoring St. Louis and Colorado. All of a sudden now Philadelphia is Stanley Cup favorites because they've gone on a 6-game winning streak. That's an overreaction to the positive side for that team. So overreactions happen a lot. We all do it as fans. We all do it with sports in general, not just hockey, but I see it all the time. Fans overreacting both positively and negatively to streaks, to things that are happening throughout the season. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what they are. They are overreactions. And Pittsburgh's still a good team, guys. Philadelphia is without a doubt a good team. They're certainly contenders. I would not call them Stanley Cup favorites yet. I think there are better teams out there. But again, when we get to the postseason, anybody can beat anybody. Anyone can make a run, and there are legitimately 10 to 12 teams who could potentially win the Stanley Cup when you get to the NHL playoffs. So, it's not easy for anybody. It's not a guarantee for anybody. And whatever happens in the regular season, you have to show up and perform in the postseason. And Philadelphia could certainly win the Cup this year. Absolutely. Pittsburgh could certainly win the Cup this year. A bunch of other teams could certainly win the Cup this year. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in the postseason and see who makes it out of the first round. Because getting out of the first round, I think, is the biggest step towards getting to the Stanley Cup final. The first round might be the hardest just because you have so many matchups, so many series going on at once, so much going on at once. And we see most of our upsets come in the first round. Most of the major upsets in the NHL playoffs come in the first round. So you have to get out of the first round before you can really start thinking Stanley Cup. And we'll see which team's able to do that this season, which ones aren't. But that's my opinion on that, guys. I think fans in general overreact a lot to things. We've just seen it with Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. I think both of those reactions, for the most part, have been overreactions. Pittsburgh's season is not over. Philadelphia is not all of a sudden the best team in the league just because of this win streak. And things, I think, will even out more as the season finishes up and goes along in the final month here. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.